The rain pounded against the windshield like a relentless drumbeat, blurring the neon lights of the city streets into streaks of red and yellow. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, as the wipers struggled to keep up. Madrid's evening traffic was a nightmare even on a clear day, but tonight, with the storm raging, it felt like the universe itself was conspiring to slow me down. My phone buzzed again on the passenger seat, another missed call from the hospital. The voice message from earlier played in my head on loop. "Senora Elena, your mother's condition has deteriorated. Please come as soon as possible." I was Elena Vargas, 35 years old, a graphic designer squeezing every freelance gig I could to make ends meet in this unforgiving city. My mother, Rosa, had been fighting lung cancer for months, but we'd all clung to the hope that the latest round of chemo would turn things around. Now, that hope felt like a cruel joke. I swerved into the hospital parking lot, splashing through puddles that mirrored the chaos in my chest. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and distant exhaust as I dashed toward the entrance, my coat soaking through in seconds. The emergency wing of Hospital Universitario La Paz was a hive of fluorescent-lit urgency. Nurses hurried past with clipboards, their faces masks of practiced calm, while families huddled in plastic chairs, eyes hollow with exhaustion. I approached the reception desk, my voice trembling as I gave my name. "Rosa Vargas, my mother." They called me. The nurse behind the counter glanced at her screen, her expression softening just a fraction. "Room 214, intensive care. Family waiting area is down the hall. She's stable for now, but the doctor will update you soon." Stable. The word offered no comfort. I nodded numbly and pushed through the double doors, the sterile smell of antiseptic hitting me like a wave. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with beeping monitors and whispered conversations. My heart hammered with every step, memories flooding back unbidden, childhood afternoons in our cramped apartment in Lavapiés, where Mama would hum old flamenco tunes while stirring paella, her laughter filling the room despite the thin walls and the constant hum of neighbors arguing. She'd raised me alone after Papa left, working double shifts as a cleaner to send me to school. And now here she was, fighting for her life while I raced against time. I reached the waiting area, a small alcove with faded blue chairs and a vending machine that sputtered out stale coffee. It was empty. No siblings, no aunts, no cousins clustered together offering solace. My brother, Javier, lived just across town in Usera, but his phone had gone straight to voicemail 3 times. "Family emergency," I'd texted, but nothing. "Our cousins in the suburbs?" Silent. It stung more than I expected. The isolation in a city that promised connection but often delivered solitude. I sank into a chair, burying my face in my hands, the rain outside pattering against the window like distant applause for my unraveling. Minutes blurred into what felt like hours. A doctor finally emerged, his white coat crisp, stethoscope dangling like a badge of authority. Dr. Morales, his name tag read. He was in his 50s, with kind eyes shadowed by fatigue. "Senora Vargas, your mother had a severe reaction to the treatment. Her oxygen levels dropped critically, but we've stabilized her. She's sedated now, resting. You can see her shortly." Tears welled up, hot and unbidden. Is she in pain?" He hesitated, choosing his words. "We're managing it. She's strong, Elena. Talk to her. It helps." Strong. That was Mama. Always the rock, even when life chipped away at her edges. I wiped my eyes and stood, following him to the room. The door slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing her frail form under the harsh lights. Tubes snaked from her arms to machines that hummed their mechanical vigil. Her chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, her once vibrant face pale against the pillow. I approached the bed, taking her hand, cool but still hers. "Mama," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." As I sat there, the door creaked open again. I turned, expecting a nurse, but it was Carlos, my husband of 8 years. He looked disheveled, his dark hair tousled from the wind, his leather jacket dotted with rain. We'd married young, full of dreams in a civil ceremony at the town hall, him promising to build a life with me in this bustling capital. But lately the cracks had shown. his job as a mechanic barely covering our rent in Chambéry, his late nights at the garage turning into excuses. "Elena," he said, crossing the room in quick strides. He pulled me into a hug, his arms familiar, yet distant. I came as soon as I could. Traffic was hell. I pulled back, searching his face. "Where's everyone else? Javier, the family?" He shrugged, glancing away. "I called Javier on the way. He said he'd try. But you know how he is. Always wrapped up in his own stuff. The others, I don't know. People get busy." Busy. The word landed like a slap. I bit my lip, nodding, though anger simmered beneath the grief. Carlos sat beside me, his hand on my knee, but his eyes darted to the monitors, then to the window. We sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the rain and the steady beep of the heart monitor. Mama's breathing evened out slightly, a small mercy. Then, out of nowhere, Carlos leaned in, his voice low. "Elena, listen. This is bad, I know. But we need to think ahead. The hospital bills, they're going to pile up. Chemo, ICU, all of it. I was talking to my cousin earlier. He knows a guy who can help with a loan, but it's $10. Zeus in run up front. Interest is low if we pay quick." I froze, my hand still in Mama's. The room seemed to tilt. "A loan? Now? Carlos, she's not even out of the woods, and you're talking about money." His face hardened, defensive. "What? We can't ignore it. Our savings are gone, your freelance dried up, my shifts got cut. If we don't act, it'll bury us. Just $10,000. I can sign for it tomorrow." The words hung in the air, cold and calculating. I stared at him. The man I'd shared a bed with, built a life with, and felt a chill deeper than the rain outside. No words of comfort, no offer to stay through the night. Just numbers, like Mama was a balance sheet. My throat tightened, emotions warring inside me. Shock, betrayal, a rising fury that made my vision blur. "Get out," I whispered, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Just get out." He blinked, mouth opening in protest, but the look in my eyes stopped him cold. For the first time in years, Carlos Vargas looked truly frozen, the weight of my silence pinning him in place. The sterile hum of the hospital room pressed in on me like an uninvited guest. The rain outside now a muffled roar against the reinforced windows. Carlos stood there, his face a mask of confusion and hurt, as if my words were the first crack in some invisible armor he'd worn for years. His mouth opened and closed, searching for a rebuttal, but the air between us felt charged, heavy with the unspoken truths we'd both ignored too long. Mama's hand in mine was a fragile anchor, her shallow breaths the only rhythm keeping me from shattering completely. "Elena, wait," he finally said, his voice dropping to a whisper, eyes flicking toward the door as if afraid a nurse might overhear. "I'm not trying to be heartless. This is real life. Bills don't stop because of this." He gestured vaguely at the bed, at the tangle of IV lines and monitors that had become her world. His jacket dripped onto the linoleum floor, pooling like accusation. I pulled my hand away from Mama's, just enough to face him fully, my chest tight with a fury I'd never let loose before. "Real life? Carlos, my mother is fighting for every breath in here, and the first thing you do is calculate the cost. Where's the man I married? The one who said we'd face anything together?" My voice cracked on the last word, but I held his gaze, refusing to look away. The room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on his stubbled jaw, highlighting the lines of exhaustion that mirrored my own. But in that moment, they only fueled my resolve. He shifted his weight, rubbing the back of his neck, a habit from our early days when arguments over late rent checks would fizzle out with a shared coffee and apologies. But this wasn't that. "I drove through that storm for you. For her. And yeah, money's tight. But ignoring it won't make it go away. My cousin's guy, it's a solid deal. We could—" "Stop." The word cut through like a knife, sharper than I intended. A nurse poked her head in at the sound, her eyes questioning, but I waved her off with a tight smile. She retreated, leaving us in the echo of my command. Carlos's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him as quickly as it had risen. He wasn't a villain, not really. Just a man shaped by the grind of Madrid's underbelly, where every euro counted double. We'd met at a neighborhood fiesta in Malasaña, Him fixing bikes for extra cash, me sketching logos in a corner cafe. Love had been easy then, before the economy squeezed us like a vice, before his garage laid off half the crew and my clients ghosted during the pandemic. But now, staring at him, I saw the distance we'd let grow. No family had shown, not Javier, who owed Mama more than he could repay after she bailed him out of debts twice. Not Tia Carmen, who lived a metro ride away in Vallecas, but claimed a prior commitment. It was always like this in our fractured clan. Promises made in sunlight, forgotten in the storm. And Carlos, my supposed partner, reducing it all to a transaction. The betrayal stung deeper than the isolation, a cold knot in my gut that made the room spin. "Fine," he muttered, backing toward the door. "I'll give you space, but think about it, Elena. We can't do this alone." His hand lingered on the knob, eyes pleading for understanding I couldn't muster. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. I turned back to Mama, sinking into the chair beside her bed, tears finally spilling over. Her face, etched with the quiet strength of a woman who'd scrubbed floors at dawn and still found time to teach me to dance sevillanas, looked so small under the sheets. "Lo siento, Mama," I whispered, stroking her knuckles. I should have seen it coming. The night stretched on, the storm easing into a drizzle that pattered like hesitant footsteps. A nurse named Sophia checked in around midnight, her warm Andalusian accent a brief comfort as she adjusted the oxygen mask. "She's holding steady," she said, glancing at me with empathy born of too many shifts. "You should rest, Carino. There's a family lounge with cots." I shook my head, unwilling to leave, but her kindness cracked something in me. We talked for a bit, about her own mother in Seville, the pull of family across distances, and for the first time that night, I felt less alone. By dawn, the sky over Madrid lightened to a bruised grey, the city awakening with its usual indifferent bustle. I stepped out for coffee from the vending machine, the bitter sludge doing little to chase away the fog in my head. My phone buzzed in my pocket, not Carlos, but a text from an unexpected source, Anna, my old university friend from the design program at Complutense. I'd messaged her in a haze the night before, more out of desperation than hope. "On my way," it read. "Heard about Rosa. Hang in there." Anna arrived an hour later, her curly hair tied back, carrying a thermos of real café con leche and a bag of churros from Chocolateria San Ginés, greasy comfort wrapped in paper. She was the one who'd always pushed me to freelance abroad, to break free from the city's chokehold, but life had kept us tethered here. "Elena," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of rain and resolve, "tell me everything." We sat in the waiting area, the chairs now occupied by other weary souls, a young father pacing with a toddler, an elderly couple sharing silent vigil. I poured it out, the call, the empty room, Carlos's cold proposal. Anna listened without interrupting, her dark eyes steady, then squeezed my hand. "He's scared like you, but that doesn't make it right. What do you need? Money? A place to crash?" "I've got savings from that Barcelona gig." Her offer hung there, simple and uncalculated, a lifeline in the chaos. For the first time, gratitude warmed the chill in my chest. Just stay, for now. We returned to Mama's room together, Anna's presence a buffer against the void. The doctor rounded mid-morning, updating us. Her vitals were improving slightly, enough for a cautious optimism, but the road ahead was long, more treatments, mounting costs that loomed like the Sierra de Guadarrama on the horizon. As Anna stepped out to call her work, my phone lit up again. "Carlos. I'm sorry. Coming back. Let's talk." I stared at the screen, the anger ebbing into something more complex. Hurt, yes, but also a flicker of the love that had sustained us. Madrid's sun broke through the clouds then, casting golden slants across the room, illuminating Mama's face. She stirred faintly, her eyelids fluttering. In that light, I felt a shift, a quiet determination rising. This wasn't just about survival. It was about choosing who stood with me when the rain fell hardest, and as Carlos's footsteps approached down the hall, I braced for the conversation that could redefine us, or break us for good. The footsteps in the hallway grew louder, deliberate, echoing off the tiled walls like a countdown. I straightened in the chair beside Mama's bed, wiping the last traces of tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. The morning light filtered through the blinds in thin, hopeful stripes, but it did little to warm the knot of anticipation twisting in my stomach. Anna had slipped out moments ago to grab fresh water from the nurse's station, leaving me alone with the steady beep of the monitors and the faint scent of hospital bleach mingling with the churros she'd left on the side table. The door opened slowly, and there was Carlos, looking smaller than I remembered, his jacket slung over one arm, hair still damp from the night's drizzle. His eyes met mine immediately, shadowed with regret, and for a split second I saw the boy I'd fallen for, the one who'd surprised me with tickets to a zarzuela at the Teatro Real on our first anniversary, whispering promises under the stars in Retiro Park. But that image faded as he stepped inside, the weight of reality pressing down on us both. "Elena," he started, his voice rough like he'd rehearsed the words in the car. He closed the door softly behind him, glancing at Mama's still form before pulling up a stool on the opposite side of the bed. The space between us felt like the Gran Via at rush hour, crowded with unspoken traffic. "I messed up, badly. I shouldn't have brought up the money like that. Not now." I crossed my arms, leaning back against the cool wall, the vinyl of the chair creaking under me. Outside, Madrid was stirring to life. The distant honk of taxis, the rumble of a metro train underground, the city indifferent to our private unraveling. When then? When the bills come? When she's better and we pretend this didn't happen? My words came out sharper than I'd planned, laced with the exhaustion of a night without sleep. Mama's chest rose and fell in her rhythmic sedation, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Carlos ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. "I panicked, okay? Driving here last night, all I could think about was how we're stretched thin already. Rent's due next week, and the garage cut my hours again, something about parts shortages from the supply chain mess. I thought, I don't know, that fixing the money would fix everything else." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his mechanic's hands, calloused from wrenches and grease, clasping together. "But you're right. I made it about numbers when it should be about us, about her." The apology hung there, genuine but incomplete, stirring a mix of relief and wariness in me. I'd spent the early hours replaying our life together, the tiny flat in Chambéry with its leaky faucet we'd laughed about, the way he'd held me after my first big client bailed, promising we'd make it. But lately, those moments felt buried under layers of resentment, his growing distance, my freelance droughts, the quiet arguments over takeout from the corner bodega instead of home-cooked meals like Mama used to make. "It's not just last night, Carlos. Where were you when I needed you before? Javier ignored me, the family's ghosts as usual, but you're supposed to be my family." He winced, nodding slowly. "I know, and I'm here now. Let me prove it. I'll stay through the day, talk to the doctors, whatever you need." His eyes pleaded, and I saw the fear beneath, the same fear that had driven him to that lone pitch, the terror of losing control in a city that chewed up dreams and spat out debts. Before I could respond, the door swung open again, and Anna returned, balancing 2 cups of coffee from the cafeteria downstairs. Her eyes narrowed slightly at Carlos, assessing, but she handed me a cup with a small smile. "Brought reinforcements. Strong, no sugar, just how you like it." She nodded at him curtly. "Carlos, good to see you." The tension eased a fraction with her presence, a buffer of normalcy in the sterile room. We settled into an uneasy truce, the 3 of us orbiting Mama's bed like planets in a fragile solar system. Anna shared stories from her latest project, a branding gig for a tapas bar in La Latina. To distract us, her laughter light but forced, pulling reluctant smiles from me. Carlos chimed in occasionally, mentioning a funny customer at the garage, his voice gaining steadiness as the morning wore on. Around noon, Dr. Morales returned with an update, his clipboard a shield against the barrage of questions. "Rosa's responding well to the adjustments. Oxygen saturation is up to 92%. No more crises for now. We can reduce the sedation soon, maybe let her wake a bit." He paused, glancing at us all. Family support makes a difference. Keep talking to her. It registers even if she can't respond. The words landed like a balm, easing the vise around my heart. As the doctor left, I squeezed Mama's hand again, whispering, "Hear that, Mama? We're all here." But even as I said it, my phone vibrated on the side table, a call from Javier's number. I answered quickly, hope flickering despite everything. "Elena, it's me." His voice was hesitant, laced with the gravel of a late night, or too many smokes. "Sorry about last night. Work ran over. Big delivery at the warehouse. How's Mama?" I bit back the sarcasm rising in my throat, the city noise filtering through the line like static. "She's better today, but Javier, she almost didn't make it. Where were you?" A pause, then a sigh. "I know, I screwed up. Look, I'm off shift now, coming over with Tia Carmen. She heard from a neighbor and feels awful. Says she'll bring some homemade tortilla. Give us an hour." The offer surprised me, a crack in the family's usual armor. "Okay, but hurry." I hung up, turning to Carlos and Ana. "Javier's on his way, with Tia." Ana raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Progress, see? People show up when you call them out." Carlos nodded, a tentative smile breaking through. "Yeah, let's make this work. For her." He reached across the bed, his hand covering mine briefly, the touch warm and familiar. For the first time since the storm, I didn't pull away. The afternoon unfolded in fits of waiting and small victories. Tia Carmen arrived first, her sturdy frame filling the doorway, arms laden with a foil-wrapped dish that filled the room with the comforting aroma of potatoes and onions. "Mi niña," she said, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of lavender soap and home. "We should have been here sooner. Life's busy, but family isn't optional." Javier followed, sheepish in his work boots, mumbling apologies as he set down a bouquet of carnations from the hospital gift shop. Simple, but the gesture mattered. The room buzzed with low voices now, a makeshift gathering amid the beeps and drips. Tia fussed over Mama, adjusting the blanket with maternal efficiency, while Javier cracked awkward jokes about Madrid traffic to lighten the mood. Carlos joined in, offering to fetch more chairs from the lounge, his actions speaking where words had failed. Ana coordinated, her practical energy keeping us grounded, reminding us to eat, to breathe. As the sun dipped toward the rooftops of Chamartín, casting long shadows across the floor, Mama stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, a soft groan escaping as the sedation wore thin. We all froze, hearts pounding. "Mama," I leaned in, my voice a whisper. Her eyes opened slowly, hazy but focusing on me. "Elena, estás aquí?" The words were weak, but they were hers, pulling a collective sigh from the room. "I'm here. We're all here." Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time from joy. In that moment, surrounded by the unlikely circle, husband redeeming himself, brother stepping up, aunt bridging the gaps, friend anchoring it all, I felt the first real thaw. The obstacles weren't gone, bills loomed, recovery was uncertain, our family's fractures ran deep. But as Mama's gaze drifted to each face, squeezing my hand with surprising strength, I realized growth came not from perfection but from showing up in the rain. And as the city hummed on outside, I knew the hardest conversations were still ahead, but we weren't facing them alone. The afternoon light softened into a golden haze, filtering through the half-drawn blinds of the hospital room like a tentative promise. Madrid's skyline peaked in the distance. The jagged outlines of high-rises and the distant hum of the Chamartín district's afternoon rush, providing a rhythmic backdrop to the quiet miracle unfolding before us. Mama's eyes, still heavy-lidded from the sedation, darted from face to face, a faint smile tugging at her cracked lips as recognition dawned. The room, once a sterile echo chamber of beeps and worry, now pulsed with the warmth of voices overlapping in hushed Spanish, laced with the familiar cadences of our family's fractured but enduring bond. "Elena, mi amor," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, raspy from the tubes that had only just been eased away. Her hand tightened in mine, the skin paper-thin but alive with intent. "Todos. Aquí." She glanced at Javier, who hovered awkwardly by the foot of the bed, his work-worn hands fidgeting with the edge of his jacket. Tia Carmen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her broad smile revealing the gold tooth she'd had since I was a child, while Anna stood sentinel near the window, her presence a steady anchor. And Carlos sat closest to her now, on the stool he'd pulled up. His earlier frostiness melted into something raw and repentant. "Claro que sí, mamá," I replied, leaning in so she could see the truth in my eyes. "No te dejamos sola." The words carried the weight of the night before, the empty waiting room, the sting of absence. But here they were, not perfect, not without their flaws, but present. Javier stepped forward first, clearing his throat. "Mamá, lo siento por no venir anoche. El trabajo. Pero eso no es excusa. Estoy aquí ahora." His voice cracked, the tough guy facade from his warehouse shifts crumbling under her gaze. She'd always had that effect, seeing through the bluster to the boy who'd once cried over a lost soccer game. Tia Carmen bustled closer, unwrapping the tortilla with efficient hands. "Mira, Rosa, te traje algo de casa. Nada de esa comida de hospital que sabe a cartón." She cut a small piece, offering it on a napkin with the reverence of a sacrament. Mamá managed a tiny bite, her nod of approval drawing chuckles from the room. It was these small rituals, the food, the teasing, the shared silences, that knit us back together, threads pulled from the tapestry of our Madrid life, where survival often meant leaning on the nearest kin, no matter the distance. Carlos waited his turn, his eyes fixed on Mamá with a gentleness I hadn't seen in months. When she turned to him, he took her other hand carefully, as if handling fine china. "Rosa, perdóname si no he sido el yerno que mereces. Anoche fui un idiota, pero te prometo, voy a estar aquí para lo que venga." His voice was low, sincere, the mechanic's directness shining through without the defensive edge. Mamá studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes, the ones that had spotted my childhood lies from across a crowded market, softening. "Eres familia, Carlos. Todos lo somos. Solo. Cuida de mi Elena." It was her way of forgiving, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet command that had guided us all. I watched the exchange, a swell of emotion rising in my chest, like the tide along the Manzanares River after a storm. The anger from last night lingered, a dull ache, but it was tempered now by the sight of him trying, really trying. Anna caught my eye from across the room, giving a subtle nod of encouragement, her own story of a messy divorce making her the perfect witness to this fragile reconciliation. She'd whispered earlier, over lukewarm coffee in the lounge, "Growth isn't linear, Elena. It's messy, like the city after rain, puddles everywhere, but the streets dry eventually." As evening crept in, the doctor returned for rounds, his update more hopeful than before. "She's out of the immediate woods. We'll monitor overnight, but discharge planning can start soon. Home care, perhaps palliative support to manage the pain." The words were clinical, but they carried a lightness that eased the tension coiled in my shoulders. Costs loomed, of course. The $10,000 Carlos had mentioned wasn't a fantasy. It was the stark reality of Spain's public health system, stretched thin, where even with insurance the extras piled up like autumn leaves in Retiro Park. But as the group discussed it quietly later, huddled in the waiting area with vending machine snacks, solutions emerged organically. Javier offered to chip in from his overtime pay, his guilt manifesting as practicality. "Puedo hacer turnos extras en el almacén. No es mucho, pero suma." Tia Carmen nodded vigorously, pulling out her battered purse. "Y yo vendo unas joyas que guardo. Nada fancy, pero cubre algo." Ana, ever the planner, mentioned a crowdfunding page she'd seen work for a neighbor's illness. "Lo montamos online, compartimos en grupos de Madrid. La gente responde cuando es real." And Carlos, redeeming himself further, confessed he'd already called the garage owner, a gruff but fair man from Galicia, for an advance on hours. "No más préstamos turbios. Hago lo que sea, pero limpio." Their support washed over me, not as a tidal wave, but as steady rain nourishing parched soil. I'd always been the fixer, the one sketching solutions in my freelance downtime, but this, leaning on them, taught me the strength in vulnerability. Back in the room as visitors trickled out with promises to return at dawn, Carlos lingered. The others gave us space, sensing the need for it. He pulled his chair closer, the dimmed lights casting a soft glow on his face. "Elena, about last night, I was scared of losing her, of losing us to this, but pushing you away. That was the real mistake." I met his gaze, the fury from before now a quiet ember. "I was scared too and hurt, but seeing you here, stepping up, it means something." We sat like that, hands intertwined across the bed, Mama dozing peacefully between us. Outside, the city lights twinkled to life, Gran Via's neon pulse a reminder that Madrid never slept, just like our worries. But in this pocket of calm I felt a shift, a personal reckoning. I'd overcome the isolation not by force but by reaching out, by demanding presence from those who'd drifted. The next morning brought clearer skies, the sun warming the hospital corridors as discharge papers were signed. Mama, propped up with pillows, insisted on going home to our old apartment in Lavapiés, where the smells of street paella and distant guitar strums would speed her healing. We wheeled her out together, a ragtag convoy against the autumn chill, Javier carrying bags, Tia with her thermos of caldo, Anna coordinating the taxi, Carlos at my side, his arm a steady weight around my waist. As we navigated the bustling streets, horns blaring and pedestrians weaving like threads in a loom, I glanced back at the hospital fading in the rear view. The crisis had cracked us open, exposing the fault lines, but it had also forged something stronger. My reaction to Carlos's demand had frozen him. Yes, but it had thawed me too, revealing the resilience I'd inherited from Mama. In the end, no one came at first, but they came when it mattered most, and in the heart of this relentless city, that was enough to keep going.